Welcome back. It's time for Media Watch with James Creedon. Hello, James.
Evening, Nadia.
And we're starting with the Libyan conflict and that amazing coverage, minute by minute, of what was going on in the Rixos Hotel.
Absolutely. In terms of the details of what have been coming out of Libya today, let's have a look at Storyful, one of these websites that collates pictures, tweets, and all sorts of information coming out of Libya. 35 journalists freed from Tripoli's Rixos Hotel. Now, this is a hotel located right by the Gaddafi compound where a lot of international journalists were staying, and progressively they began to realise that they weren't able to leave the hotel, which was still in the Gaddafi-controlled part of the city. So lots of tweets trying to sum up those 5 or 6 days which became increasingly desperate. Everyone who stayed at Rixos Tripoli compared it to the Hotel California. You can check out whenever you want, but you can never leave, as said one journalist for CNN. And then there was this journalist, Matthew Price of the BBC. He said basically what was happening inside the hotel was that soldiers weren't aware of the extent to which Gaddafi had lost the battle for Tripoli. They were holding on in there under orders from Saif al-Islam and others, and in the mistaken belief that they had the upper hand. So extraordinary information coming from journalists who were inside that hotel. And earlier in the day, actually, he spoke about the desperate situation in the Rixos Hotel. Matthew Price speaking to BBC Radio 4 this morning. So quite a dramatic day in Tripoli for journalists in any case.
Now been released, yes, and as we were saying, 4 Italian journalists have also now been kidnapped. Now, speaking of the media, there's been some criticism of the coverage in one Algerian paper.
That's right. This is the Le Quotidien d'Oran, Oran being one of the biggest cities in Algeria, and they look at the media's role in the Libyan war, and quite critically, in fact. They speak about rolling news channels not being very neutral, and they give the example of Al Jazeera, owned by the Emir of Qatar. Qatar was one of the countries involved in the coalition that went to help the National Transitional Council. And as they said, Al Jazeera has been, as this journalist says, Al Jazeera has been a far more powerful tool than any weapons that Qatar could have provided. And for the journalist, he also says the media were not just reporting what happened in Libya, they were in some ways actors shaping the pace of events. For example, declaring the Gaddafi regime finished. Perhaps that demoralized the final kind of supporters of the regime. Also saying that Saif al-Islam had been arrested when it turned out that he hadn't. For this journalist, that was simply a propaganda exercise which allowed the National Transitional Council to arrest many people, some 30 soldiers and senior officers who perhaps then believed that their boss was arrested. So he's basically saying that the media hasn't been entirely neutral, that there has been a certain degree of, politicking going on in their role in Libya.
Now let's go now to the dismissal of the Strauss-Kahn case, and there's been a lot of analysis of that in the French press, obviously.
That's right. Let's just have a look at some of the pieces that have come out. This is a blog by media journalist Renaud Reval. Now he says everybody lost in the Strauss-Kahn case. Dominique Strauss-Kahn himself and his political future. The media, both in the US and France, which were strongly criticised by the other side, if you like. Also, the American justice system revealed to, in some way, be quite political, with the New York prosecutor Cyrus Vance clearly in some ways having his own career in mind in the advancement of this case. So the only person to walk away from it with her head held high, according to Renaud Reval, is Anne Sinclair, who gave us all a lesson in elegance. Now it's an interesting take on things, and worth pointing out that he's written a book, quite a glowing book, about Anne Sinclair. Now another piece in L'Express is this article. It's actually an interview of Thibault de Montbrial. Now, he was one of the lawyers for Nafissatou Diallo in France. Now, he spoke about a Dominique Strauss-Kahn system, a whole system in Sarcelles, the town where he was once mayor to the north of Paris, and in Paris generally. And he spoke about how many women approached him as the lawyer in France for Nafissatou Diallo to act as witnesses in the case. And people working in the transport sector, in politics, in the media, so quite a number of people. And on each occasion, they were contacted, according to this lawyer, by the Strauss-Kahn system, and in some ways made to be quiet. Well, he doesn't go into all of that, but in any case, he speaks about the Strauss-Kahn network to being deploying all means to dissuade women who might have become witnesses.
And there's an investigation being launched on that, isn't there?
Absolutely. Now, just one further article in Le Monde, worth pointing out in the French press. North America has a sex problem. Now, this is according to one writer, Pascal Bruckner. So, of course, we saw this massive cultural war emerging between the US and France around this case. North America has a sex problem. He said this comes from its Protestant heritage and its lewd Puritanism, which condemns sex scandals while also being fascinated by them. For this journalist, there were other scandals that should have just got just as much attention, and this was an opportunity for the American media to punish France for its opposition to the Iraq War over the Roman Polanski scandal, and also for the ban of the niqab. So he's certainly taking it to the nth degree in terms of where those cultural differences and those axes to grind might be. So the ultimate meaning of the Strauss-Kahn scandal for him is basically it was an opportunity to cut the French down to size.
And speaking of the US, what's the reaction been there?
All right, well, let's have a look. I mean, at the New York Post, one of the tabloids that was very prominent in all this. Now, we remember headlines such as this, right? There was the DSK maid is a hooker, and more famously again, Le Perv. So they were attacking both sides in the case. And here, look what they're saying today. It's if we could pull it up, a pox on both their houses, just say au revoir. So now they're not just down on one side or the other, they're down on both. First,
Shakespeare would have loved this, wouldn't he?
Who would have loved
Shakespeare.
it? I think he would have. I think he had pox on both their houses. Mon Dieu, kick this toad out of town, they say, and chuck his woman too. I think that's about Anne St. Clair, who probably doesn't really deserve that. This freaky French guy tangled with the wrong maid. She's sneaky and obscene. He's a wantonly adulterous Pepe Le Pieux, a rich, horny Gallic goofball. This is all in the New York Post today. She told lies about being gang raped, kicked them both out and changed the locks. So basically, the case might be over, but the insults in the New York tabloids aren't. They're still as strongly worded as ever.
James Creedon, thank you very much for that quite strong-worded Media Watch. That is where we're leaving Media Watch, but of course you can stay with us on France 24. There's another news update just coming up after this short break. Thank you.
Brittany, the heartland of French pig farming and an agricultural powerhouse. But can the region's farmers do more to reduce the toxic green algae mounting along the beach? Join us this week for Environment to find out.
Don't miss Environment, Saturday, 11:40 a.m. Paris time on France 24.